Call the meeting of the Planning Commission to order.
Are we missing people today?
Commissioners, you have the agenda in front of you, but there's a couple announcements on item number 6, the Erskines addition. It's a request for zone change located at 1117 and 1155 13th Avenue South. That's being continued to the March 7th Planning Commission meeting. So there'll be no presentation of the item. But if anybody's here in the audience that wants to testify on that item, please let me know, and you can do it right away so you can get out of here as well. We can move that up. Is there anybody here that was here for item 6? Okay, seeing none, when we get to that, we'll continue that item. Then second is item number D1. It's the PUD final plan for the Dwayne's Pizza addition, the 1600 block of University Drive South. That is also continued to the March 7th Planning Commission, so there'll be no presentation by staff or action taken by us on that item. However, an FYI, that D3, even though it's a different name, it's on the same property, that will happen, so they don't want you to leave because that item's continued if you have interest in that project. And if anybody does want to talk on D1, I guess you can let me know at that time too, and we can see if we have time for that. Otherwise, look for a motion to approve the order of agenda with those continuations, I guess.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Thank you. A motion and second. Any other discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
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 Motion- Oh, and we have Commissioner Holtz online. Forgot about that one. Item number B is the minutes from our January 3rd meeting. Commissioners, have you had a chance to review the minutes? Take a motion.
I'll make a motion to accept the minutes.
Thanks.
Second.
Motion and second. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Moving on to the public hearing items. Item number 1 is an application requesting a plat on Commerce on 12th edition. And will Donald give us a rundown?
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Donald Kress from the Department of Planning and Development. We have a dead zone there, as I see. I think we can work around it, though. As the Commissioner's Chair stated, item 1 is Commerce on 12th, 8th edition. This has been a busy place for the last decade. This property is located, here's 12th Avenue North and 57th Street North, and the horse park up here. So this is 4 lots between 13th and 14th Avenues North. Across the street is West Fargo. Slightly improved map than was in your packet. Again, the subject property is the 4 lots outlined there. There's development on the one side there. It's a trucking company. Just a couple of views here from the corners, north and south there. And as you see, the building there and these, this owner wants to expand his industrial operation. The zoning there is LI, limited industrial. The existing zoning is the existing land use on that property is consistent with the LI zoning. No zone change is proposed. The applicant's plat looks like this. There are 4 lots here again being combined into one. As noted in your staff report, there's an existing negative access easement which protects the intersections here. That's going to remain on the plat. The applicant's representative, Brian Pattengale of Houston Engineering, is with us this afternoon and may wish to address the commission. The recommended motion is stated in your staff report and shown on the screen. That concludes staff's presentation for this item, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Donald. Any questions for staff? Seeing none, is there anyone in the audience that wishes to address this item, or is the applicant here and wishes to add anything? Thank you. Any questions for the applicant? Seeing none, does anyone else in the audience wish to speak on this item, either for or against? Seeing nobody else, we will close the public hearing. Commissioners, what are your wishes?
I'll make the motion to accept the findings of staff as presented in our packet.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion and second. Any discussion? Seeing none, will you take the roll?
Tassa,
Aye.
Morgan,
Aye.
Schmidt,
Aye.
Shuey,
Aye.
Dunkelman,
Aye.
Holtz,
Aye.
Schneider.
Aye, and the motion passes. Moving on to item number 2. Donald, why don't you cover it?
Yes, sir. Thank you. Moving to the south side of town now. Here we are on 64th Avenue South and 25th Street South. Here's Davies High School as a landmark. This area here is proposed to be the Golden Valley 7th Edition, another busy area in the last decade here. Most of this is what was once platted as the Golden Valley 3rd Edition in 2020, and the applicant has a proposal to revise this plat somewhat. Again, entirely undeveloped. There actually is no street here yet. There's no utilities or no streets in there. Again, just a couple of views here from north and south, looking at the big field there. The zoning here is SR4, single dwelling residential. No zone changes proposed by this plat. The plat looks like this. It is the same configuration as the original plat, except there's a greater number of lots. There are actually additionally 10 more lots. There are 42 now, and there will be 52 as a result of this. This is achieved by slightly narrowing all the lots, and as you see, the dotted lines, or rather the dashed lines, are the existing lots, and the solid lines are the new lots. Even though the lots are being narrowed, they're still reasonably wide here. This chart is in your staff report, but it shows the existing lots. Here are the ranges of the lot widths, and then here are the proposed lot widths. So again, except for the ones on the corners, most of them are in the 50 to 52 foot range, which will still allow some room for parking and snow storage and snow removal for those properties. The recommended motion of staff is stated in your staff report and shown on the screen. John Eunice at Eagle Ridge Development. The developer is with us this afternoon and may wish to address the commission. Thank you, commissioners.
Thank you, Donald. Any questions for staff? Seeing none. Mr. Eunice, do you have anything to add? We have any questions for the applicant?
I have one,
Okay.
just because
We'll
it's,
invite you up and please introduce yourself.
Commissioners, John Eunice with Eagle Ridge Development.
What are we learning and why are we decreasing? I'm guessing it has to do with what's going on in the market, costs of homes and getting people into a home.
Certainly, yeah, that definitely plays a large factor in it. Maintaining affordable special assessments as well for entry-level homes is a big factor in it.
these would be considered entry-level homes then.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do really know how little 50 feet is. They used to make lake lots 50 feet down in the lake area, and everybody that has those kinds of lots feels really cramped. But I expect that if these are, new homeowners, maybe they'll want to move on at some point. I just know that 50 feet isn't a very wide space.
Yeah, 50 feet is large enough that you can get a Rambler with a 3-stall garage on it or a 2-story with a 3-stall garage. It gives the builder the flexibility and the buyer the flexibility not just to have on some of the smaller lots you can only fit a 2-stall garage. This gives some more options for the builders.
Thank you. Any other questions for Mr. Eunice?
Commissioner,
Yes.
I believe you also had some twin homes planned, Mr. Eunice?
Yes, those are the one of the issues we run into when you have curved lots is that the special assessments tend to get pretty high, just because they've got a bigger lot area. So if you look at the northeast and north and southeast corners, we're planning some slightly smaller lots that are actually designed for twin homes to go on them. And that again we're doing that in an effort to try to get the special assessments, in an affordable price point.
Yeah, I very much like the idea of the twin homes. Looking at the drawing here, do these have access at the back of the property as well as the front?
No, the only access will be on the front of the lots. There's a negative access easement along 67th and no access along 25th Street as well.
Okay. So I assume the garages will all be in the front.
Correct.
Okay.
And Commissioner Morgan, to add to that, in the original version, as you see depicted in the middle of the block here, there was originally proposed to be an alley
Yeah.
access, but with this replat, that will be eliminated. That's what all that cross-hatching and so on is there. That will eliminate that alley, and as you say, all the access will be from the street.
Yeah, I really like the idea of alleys if they're well maintained, just because of accessibility to the property. Just seems like it's possible to do a lot nicer development. That's all, as long as it fits the codes.
Thanks. Anything? Yes, go ahead.
I guess, yeah, this isn't a question for John, maybe more of a Donald question,
Yes,
but John's comment kind of sparked this question. He had mentioned specials on curves usually end up being more. I'm guessing that's because of lineal feet of frontage there. But when we look at a development like this, how can you explain maybe the process of how the streets are laid out and connectivity, reducing curves, maybe compared to like our traditional neighborhoods where we're all gridded, and if you kind of look, if you zoom out, I guess even on this sheet in the upper left corner, each development is kind of segmented off, and there's not a lot of connectivity unless you kind of funnel to those other streets to get there. So can you maybe just explain what that process looks like?
Well, I'll start with that, and perhaps our city engineer, our assistant planning director would want to join in as well. So in our land development code, there is a section under the subdivision section of that called street geometrics. So there are minimum required lot widths that are based on the zoning of the adjoining properties, which always must be met. So that's why you see, when you look at the plat, you see, 62 feet here. Well, I guess these are all 62 feet, but 100 feet here right away for 25th Street. And so those always have to be met, and that's a requirement for that. In a residential neighborhood, we do not require 100% four-square grid. We do require access from arterials and collectors, but we also we have no prohibition on loops like this and loops like this. We do try to avoid cul-de-sacs. There are some in various places in Fargo, and as I say that, I see there are two right here. But more recently, in the last several years particularly, we have tried to avoid supporting those, and that's something that planning, engineering, and public works are all in favor of. And but they do, to have a little more, a little less busy neighborhood, some of these loops and like this here, we have no objection to that as long as they maintain connectivity with a major street or an arterial or collector, and they don't get too big. You'll notice that this is a pretty short loop here, and so they don't just go on for blocks and blocks. And so does that a response for you, sir? Or?
Yeah, I mean, I guess that explains why it's shaped like this.
Sure.
I just think about it. I live in a traditional neighborhood. Mm-hmm. It's all gridded, and
so do I.
Walking from point A to point B, I can take
mm-hmm.
so many different ways to do it. But here, you kind of always have to be funneled to the arterial to go to your neighbors, who are if it's a straight grid, it might be a minute away. But I guess this is more of just a discussion and trying to understand.
Sure. And another thing that we don't run into with this one is we do have a maximum block length. So you should never get a residential block that's a quarter mile or so long because you'd have to have a pedestrian interrupt there. And you're probably familiar with some of these. I always think of the Lincoln Park pass through there, that kind of thing. These we don't consider in excess of that block length, even though it is it's a looped block. But we do have that protection as well for just endless things without interruption.
So what is the future of cul-de-sacs if they're being discouraged at this point?
Well, we generally try to talk to the developers to not have them, right, Mr. Eunice? We've talked about this quite a bit. I don't know, Ben or Brenda, do you have any comment on that?
Well, I'd say, we understand if there's a section left and that's maybe the only option left. But when you're looking at that larger master plan, we do try and encourage connectivity and mitigate cul-de-sacs.
Thank you.
Any other questions for the applicant while we have them up
Well,
here?
one thing just to address Commissioner Schmidt's question, one of the issues we run into, like in a situation like this, is that there's access restrictions off of arterial roads, and so we can't put, like, if that loop, if there was a road on the far east side, we're too close to 25th Street to connect it. So in some instances like this, we end up getting forced into these sort of radiuses. And I'll say, depending on the price point, you know, depending on the style and of house that you're going for, the special assessments play a critical role in it. The larger lots get to be less of a critical component. And that's why in this case, as we're kind of targeting a price point, having those twin homes in the corners makes more sense because we can spread those assessments out over a number of lots as opposed to just a couple.
And I would say too, so I live in this neighborhood and if there's roads to get to parks, I mean, where you're going here is parks. There's really not much, you know what I mean, where people are walking to. We have access to all the parks. There's roads to all the park. There's access to all of that. We've been to every park down here. So although there's cul-de-sacs, like there's a cul-de-sac where I live, but there's a road that shoots right to the next road. So there's roads in between the houses to allow the connectivity, the biking, the going to the parks and stuff, so.
And then just to reinforce that too, you know, as you notice here, going back on the aerial view, this whole property here all the way down, this whole area is pinned between the drain and 25th Street, which was there before any of this developed. So there, you know, there's limited opportunities to redevelop that. Unlike, you know, I live in North Side, and when that was built, you know, once you're west of the river, you know, just keep going. You know, there's no constraint. So.
Thank you. Anyone in the audience wish to speak either for or against this item? Anybody want to add anything?
Could I just ask,
Sure.
Is there a recreational trail that comes into that neighborhood?
Yes, ma'am. If you look, well, unfortunately, the black line of the property outline blocks it out, but there is a 10-foot trail on the south side here on the adjacent to the back of these, or the, you know, adjacent to 67th Avenue in the right of way. And that
Okay.
will eventually cross the drain.
It crosses where?
It's right here,
Yeah, I see it.
and then it'll eventually cross the drain when that gets across.
Oh, I see.
Yep.
Okay.
And then there's also the one on, I guess that's really on the other side of 25th. There's the bike trail on the other side of 25th Street too.
And are these lot size, the revised lot sizes similar to the ones to the north? Looks like those are a little smaller. Okay.
It's,
I
Area.
think they would be. Mr. Eunice, do you know they are there? Okay.
fits in with the rest of the.
And as we've discussed too, you know, Commissioner Schmidt, following up on some comments you've had, sometimes they do get smaller. Sometimes, you know, we're occasionally requested to get bigger. The market changes back and forth, and, you know, real estate is always behind. So in the time it takes a developer to figure things out and to get everything platted, by the time he's ready to roll, the market might have changed a little bit and need to come back and make some adjustments. We realize that happens. So, thank you, Commissioners.
Oh, just one more question. I've been noticing that on some of the older arterial roads, that the fences are mismatched, and they don't hang together that well, and they aren't kept up equally. Is there fencing around the outside of this?
You don't have any requirement for
isn't,
fencing,
right.
do you? No, and we do not have a requirement for fencing.
Okay.
So.
I think it's always a concern.
Good commissioners, any other comments or questions? Otherwise, take a motion.
I'll make the motion to accept staff's finding.
Thanks. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion and second. Any discussion? Seeing none, please take the roll.
Dunkelman,
Aye.
Holtz,
Aye.
Shuey,
Aye.
Morgan,
Aye.
Schmidt,
Aye.
Tassa,
Aye.
Schneider.
Aye. Motion passes.
Thank you, Commissioners.
Moving on to items 3A and 3B, and we'll invite Luke. Oh, Luke's already at the phone, beat me to it. Go ahead.
Afternoon, Commissioners. Luke Mormon with the Planning Department. Items 3A and 3B is Valley View Estates 4th Edition. This is located at 3606 through 4890 Decorah Way South. And to give you some context, we have 45th Street South here, 36th Avenue South, and then 49th Street South, and Independence Elementary School on the corner of the image there. The applicant is requesting a zone change and minor subdivision entitled Valley View Estates 4th Edition. With some site photos on the top, we're facing northeast across the subject property from the 49th Street south. You can see a multi-use trail that goes from along the south side of the subject properties. And then on the bottom, we're facing south from 36th Street, which is along the east edge of the subject properties. The zoning is currently SR4 single dwelling residential and PI public and institutional, changing to just SR4 single dwelling residential and a CO conditional overlay to limit the density. The plat combines 18 lots into one lot, and staff has received and responded to one general inquiry about this project. Here's a site plan provided by the applicant for reference only, and to the left of the screen is north, just to give you some reference there. And this shows the buildings, the site layout, and the road circulation within the proposed lot. There are a couple of typos in my staff report, so in order to clarify the proposal, this item combines the existing 18 lots into a one lot minor subdivision, removes the PI zoning, and adds a CO to limit the max density. Currently, there are 17 possible residences. As you can see in the plat here, the one lot here was just a common ownership there. The rest of them were developable single-family home lots, or single-dwelling lots. The applicant proposes the 27 residences as shown, but under the SR4 zone, this 3.74 acre lot would accommodate for 45 residences, and so that comes in with the conditional overlay to limit the density to 7.3 units per acre, which is a maximum of 27 dwelling units. Staff's recommendation is shown on screen. We find that all criteria are met and are recommending approval with the conditions shown. And project representative John Eunice is here to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Luke. Any questions for staff? Seeing none, we'll ask Mr. Eunice back up the podium. You know, given our history on this property, I thought maybe it would be good for you to kind of let us know what the evolution of this is and from your perspective.
Absolutely. John Eunice again with Eagle Ridge Development. So we've been in front of you guys a couple different times on this property. Originally, I believe there was 19 or 21 units, and then it was reduced down a couple of units. And then we've been approached by a group that's looking to do a single-family rental residential community there, given the location and infill. They felt like this would make some sense. From a layout perspective, we're trying to figure out basically it's a similar layout to what was there before. These are going to be single-family rentals, ramblers, maybe a story and a half. We felt like it blended pretty well with the existing neighborhood. But this is not a for-sale project. This would be purely for rent.
Thanks for that additional information. Any questions for the applicant?
Just out of interest, so there is an organization. Is it a group of people, an organization that does this traditionally in cities, or is it unique to Fargo? I'm just interested in how that came about.
Well, around town, there's been a number of builders and developers that have built single-family houses for rent, and this is just a more efficient way to do it versus the traditional neighborhood with 50 or 60-foot wide lots. It allows for reductions in the operational expenses when it comes to snow removal and lawn care and those types of things.
I see. And then because it's rental, does that then mean that whoever is managing it would be responsible for the snow removal and upkeep of the neighborhood?
Yep, it'd be professionally managed, so there'd be one contractor that would be responsible for all the snow removal and one contractor responsible for all the lawn care. And that would be a part of the, when you go to rent the unit, it'd be similar to a lot of townhome type projects around town that we have, that's all a part of the rent. So the tenants would not be expected to do their own maintenance.
What is the price range?
It's pretty early right now. Prices have been fluctuating quite a bit. If I had to pick a number, I would say it's going to be somewhere around $2,000 a month.
Okay, thank you.
So it's a detached apartment complex, is that?
Yeah, single family rental.
Any other questions? Yeah, go ahead.
Will there be sidewalks provided in the development?
There'll be some sidewalks connecting, yep.
Just,
That's a good question, I guess. Does our sidewalk ordinance, is that sort of, I mean, I hate to say get around this, because I don't think that's the intent, but our sidewalk ordinance would only require it on the outside of the property? Is that the outside of the block? Okay.
Whoops, sorry. Yes, you're correct. So the sidewalk ordinance would only require it within the right-of-way. Then they would work on connectivity within the development.
Go ahead.
just, these are coming. I mean, just coming from the builders show last week, the classes on these type of developments or these type of projects were standing room only. In fact, a lot of people couldn't get into the classes on them, so. I think nationally right now, this market is about 10% of the new homes that are sold or constructed are going to rental. So we're gonna see more of this.
Any other questions for the applicant?
One more question. I think on the previous version, there was a trail connectivity to that walking path. Would that remain in the project, or? would
There'll
that
be
go-
sidewalks that would connect the residential houses to the public right of way.
I guess when we look at this one, wasn't that previously an access, that the one that goes south?
That
connects
was,
to the
that did not
trail?
actually connect to that
Oh,
trail. That was
okay.
just a drive aisle to get that far southeast lot access to the garage.
Got it. Thanks for clarifying.
Any other questions for the applicant? Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone in the audience wish to speak either in for or against this item? Anyone in the audience? Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing. Commissioners, what are your wishes?
Move to approve as presented?
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion and second, any discussion? Seeing nothing further, we'll take the roll.
Morgan,
Aye.
Schmidt,
Aye.
Holtz,
Aye.
Gunkelman,
Aye.
Tassa,
Aye.
Shuey,
Aye.
Schneider.
Aye. Motion passes. Moving on to number 4. Kick it back to you, Luke.
Yes, item 4 is Christensen 32nd Avenue South Edition. This is located at 3165 33rd Street South. To give some context, we have 32nd Avenue South, 36th Street South, and then 33rd Street South. If you can see my cursor on the screen. The applicant is requesting a CUP conditional use permit for an alternative access plan for parking reduction on Lot 2, Block 1, Christensen 32nd Avenue South, 2nd Edition. Please note that though this project was originally advertised as giving the CUP to include a shared parking agreement, but after further discussion with staff, we determined that the parking reduction will address all of staff's concerns for the project. For some site photos, on the top, we're facing west from 33rd Street. And then on the bottom of the screen, we're facing north from 33rd Street, but further south. So you can see the 33rd Street South and then 32nd Avenue South. So this is currently under construction for the building shell. And then this CUP is coming in to account for different tenant fit-ups. The zoning is GC General Commercial and no zone changes proposed. Here's a site plan for reference, and this shows all the uses that are proposed and the parking layout as well. There's 152 spaces provided on site. The parking requirements increased based on the updated uses and their square footages that differ from the original site plan that was approved this last year. For some parking study findings that was provided by Alteg Engineering, they reference the Parking Generation Manual 5th edition by the Institute of Traffic Engineers, or ITE. So on the top table, a couple things they pointed out was the parking lot utilization during various times of the day with peak demand, day of the week, and month of the year. On the bottom table, it shows the LDC parking requirements and the average required parking supply rate based on the ITE. And so with the average parking supply rates, total demand for this site shows 166 parking spaces, but based on the peak parking demand of the proposed uses shown, the maximum demand at any given time is less than 152 spaces provided on site. Planning staff and the city traffic engineer reviewed and are in support of the proposal. We have received no inquiries in response to the project. Staff finds that all criteria to be met and are recommending approval with the listed conditions. And please note the laydown item for condition number 3. That was added due to the staff concern of any future changes in business plans that could affect the hours of operation. Project Representative Chris Mack is here to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Luke. Any questions for staff? Go ahead.
So when this project is under construction, so I'm still a little confused that they came back to you for a parking reduction. Did they have enough parking for what was originally proposed?
Yep. So it was originally approved for a different, sometimes they fit it up for general uses because we have to assign a parking ratio for when we review it for permit. So it was full restaurant, retail, and fast food restaurant uses, which were different parking ratios. And based on the square footage provided at the time, they met. And then with this updated uses and their square footages, then we had to come back. So I think the applicant could also address some context for that as well.
So with the tenants that they have now, without the parking study, they would need more parking. Is that what the bottom line is?
Yep.
And they provided the parking study to allow the reduction?
Yep.
Okay. That kind of clarifies it for me.
Any other questions for staff? Otherwise,
I have one.
oh yeah, go ahead.
If the applicant's parking study showed that a maximum demand of 146 is justified, how did we land on upping that to 152 for a minimum?
The 152 is what was provided on site.
Okay.
Yep. I think that was kind of what they could fit for themselves.
Okay, we'll invite the applicant up. Please introduce yourself.
Yeah, I am Chris Mack with Christensen Companies. I think Luke explained it fairly well on, we had a change of use. We didn't plan on 2 restaurants at this location. It was retail and a restaurant and some fast food. Now we do have a user that will do a restaurant, and one thing, I don't know if Luke showed it, but the way this restaurant that we are getting in at this location, it would be like a brunch and breakfast place. So their peak hours would be in the morning, and then they're closed at 2. So that's why he was showing that one table. And then as we go forward and the building gets filled out, if there is additional higher demand users for parking, we do have additional land where we could maybe do a lot line adjustment or do a replat, and we can make the parking lot larger. But right now, we don't want to do that because we do have other pad sites that we would like to keep as large as possible for future development, so.
Thanks for that information.
Yep.
Any questions for the applicant? Seeing none, is there anyone else in the audience that wishes to provide comments for or against? Anybody else in the audience? Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing. Commissioners, what are your wishes?
I have one more question, sorry.
Yeah, oh, go ahead.
Okay, so this brought up a question. So if the parking study was done and the breakfast restaurant is only open till 2, let's say in the future that turns into a different business, do we have enough parking? You know what I mean? So we're at current state. How do we prepare for future state to make sure we have enough parking?
Item 3.
Thank you. Okay. Never mind.
Good work, staff. Any other comments or otherwise ready for a motion?
I'll make the motion to accept the findings of staff as presented with the 3 attached conditions.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any comments or questions on the 3 items? Seeing none, please take the roll.
Holtz,
Aye.
Tassa,
Aye.
Shuey,
Aye.
Gunkelman,
Aye.
Morgan,
Aye.
Schmidt,
Aye.
Schneider.
Aye. Motion passes. Moving on to number 5 with Megan.
Good afternoon, Chair and Commission. Item 5 is Global Development Edition. This is an application for a minor subdivision. It is located at 602, 610, 636, and 650 Northern Pacific Avenue North. As you can see on the aerial image, on the north is Northern Pacific Avenue North, on the south is BNSF. Broadway is just a bit over to the east, Renaissance Zone Hall, Fire Station number 1, for some context. The owner here is City of Fargo, owner applicant City of Fargo and Global Development Edition. If you have any questions, there are representatives here to be able to answer. This is a plat of an unplatted portion of the northwest quarter of Section 7, Township 139 North, Range 48 West. This property has not ever been platted. Up on your screen are some images of the site. It's a little hard to see in the winter with the views here, but this is facing the property looking southeast from Northern Pacific Avenue, looking into the site. And then the picture on the south is facing northwest, looking from the railroad tracks into the site. And I'm going to flip back here. So currently it is a surface level parking lot. So this application before you today is a minor subdivision to plat currently 4 parcels into 2 lots. As I mentioned previously, this has never been platted. So this is a plat to plat that property in preparation for future development. Staff received 2 inquiries on the application with no noted concern, just more curious about more so future development. So with that, staff is recommending approval of the project or of the application. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you. Is there any questions for staff?
Do you have any identification of who those parcels would be platted for?
You know, I guess I can't say for sure how that would all shake out if there was a project that came to fruition. Jim Gilmore is here, and so he may be able to describe that in more detail for you.
Thanks. We'll ask Jim up to the podium.
Thank you. This is a proposal that the City Commission has approved for a mixed-use development that would include the Fargo Morrid Community Theater, apartments developed by Kilborn Group, and a parking garage owned by the city. We're in design stages, and so we don't have a lot of details as far as where exactly the buildings would be located. But the goal is to start on this summer, and what will happen is the city would sell its parcel to Great Plains NP Holdings, which is a development group for this project. Mr. Thorson is here from Global Development. They would also be selling their parcel. They would be then combined, and there'd be a mixed-use development, and which would be condominiumized into 3 different uses.
Thank you, Jim. Any questions while we have Jim up here? It's good. Are we bringing the cinema grill back? Or?
Hopefully something better.
Yeah.
I think the community theater will be better.
Yes, and hopefully better architecture.
Lance, you want to come up and give any input? Any questions for the applicant? The other applicant? Seeing
Well,
none?
I would
Oh.
just like to comment that I've been excited about the project. As it's been kind of over the years, it's changed a little bit. I know that you're planning on doing some different things with the Broadway corner there too, which would hopefully play into the rest of these developments. So I'm excited to see how it's all going to play out.
Is there anyone else in the public that wishes to add any comments either for or against this item? Seeing no one else in the audience, we'll close the public hearing. Commissioners, what are your wishes?
Move to accept staff findings and recommendation.
Thank you. We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion and second. Any discussion? Seeing none, we'll take the roll.
Schmidt,
Aye.
Shuey,
Aye.
Morgan,
Aye.
Tassa,
Aye.
Gunkelman,
Aye.
Holtz,
Aye.
Schneider.
Aye. The motion passes. We'll invite Donald back up for item number 6. So I guess that we are continuing that item. So I will just ask again, is there anyone in the audience that was here for item number 6 that wishes to provide comments while it was advertised? Okay, otherwise, we'll continue it to the next commission meeting.
Yes, sir, that's correct. The applicant requested that this morning, sir.
Okay. Do we need to take action to continue it, or is that?
I think they just requested.
They just requested, okay. Moving on to item number 7.
Item number 7 is Keeney and DeWitt's second edition, another downtown development project very close by here. So here's the Second Street Bridge. The City Hall is off the picture, but we're right about down here. This is the City Center lofts. This is where the former Armed Forces Recruiting Center, and for those of you who remember it, Shakey's Pizza was over here. As you see, this is under construction. This site has been leveled and is under construction for a new residential project there. This piece of the property here is actually a piece of the 5th Street right-of-way, or sorry, 5th Avenue North right-of-way, which was platted in the 1870s. This portion of the right-of-way was vacated some time ago, but this part was not included in that vacation. In order to complete the entire property that's going to be used for development here, this piece needs to be vacated, and it will go entirely to this property, so it'll become a contiguous property. This is the fence line here up against the right-of-way. So the area to be vacated is on this side of the fence. And we're not vacating the whole street. We're not dividing this whole street between all adjacent owners. We're just taking that narrow strip off there of part of the right-of-way. The zoning here is DMU. As noted, there is construction going on there as we are meeting here today. There is a city access easement that will be retained after the vacation is completed, is recorded. Again, this is just a vacation plat. We do vacations of right-of-way pursuant to North Dakota Century Code state statute. So there's actually nothing in our LDC. So we follow a process that includes a lengthy advertising process prior to the city commission that's been around for a long time. So we just we use that procedure. As noted in your staff report there aren't any too dramatic findings on it. We just verify that there are no utilities in there and follow the notification and hearing procedures. The city is the applicant for this. And so if you have any questions, city staff is here for you. Otherwise, the recommended motion is stated in your staff report and shown on the screen. That concludes staff's presentation. Thank you, commissioners.
Thank you. Any questions for Donald?
I'd like to ask if there is a sale price involved with this or if it's just vacation.
It is my understanding that it's a vacation, but I would ask Mr. Gilmore. if you know
It
that.
is a vacation.
Okay.
So in fact, it's really just cleaning up. On our base map, it's been shown as vacation. But as we dug into all the history of this property, we could not find anything that stated it had ever actually been vacated. And so this is really a cleanup of that area.
Okay.
Any other questions for Donald? I guess you're the applicant, so anyone else from the public wishes to speak on this item? Seeing no one else in the public standing up, we'll close the public hearing. Commissioners, what are your wishes?
I'll make the motion to accept the findings of staff as presented.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Please take the roll.
Schmidt,
Aye.
Holtz,
Aye.
Gunkelman,
Aye.
Morgan,
Aye.
Tassa,
Aye.
Shui,
Aye.
Schneider.
Aye. Motion passes.
Thank you, commissioners.
Thank you. Item number 8, that's Brad to the podium. University South Second Edition.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Item number 8 is a conditional use permit for an alternative access plan. And this is located in just west of University Drive South, located here, and is part of the Kmart redevelopment area here. And so this is the MR3 zoned property to the west of the commercial strip mall, which is currently being developed right here. And here's just a couple photos of the current site. As you can see, it's nothing has happened on this portion yet. And as noted, this is the MR3, so this will be for a senior housing project. And I think there's going to be 39 units total, if I remember correctly. So then what the applicant has done is they provided a parking study that, or a utilization study to show current operations for some of their other projects that they have or operate in the city here. And as you can see, a couple of these already have conditional use permits showing parking ratios of two parking spaces per dwelling unit, and then also 2 other properties with 1.5 parking spaces per dwelling unit. And with this study, what they're trying to show here is that even with those parking reductions, they still aren't utilizing all the parking spaces for their properties that they have available. So with this new construction, they're requesting that the parking ratio, which is currently 2.25 parking spaces per dwelling unit, be reduced down to 1.5 parking spaces per dwelling unit, which again is consistent with kind of the data that they're showing from their other properties. And as noted in previous meetings, there's a 2018 MetroCog study showing that parking throughout the city is generally overparked, and I think the utilization rate specifically for residential typologies was about 74%, and that included a mix of student housing, market rate housing, and senior housing. And in that study, the senior housing actually had assistant living. With this proposed property, it's going to be just senior housing, independent senior housing. And the additional properties that they currently operate also are independent living as well. So based on that parking study from MetroCog and then also the applicant's utilization study, that it seems pretty consistent with the request of 1.5 parking spaces per dwelling unit. And then here's just an example of what this would look like with the proposed site plan. This is a current site plan that they have with it as a permit, a construction permit. And then the green is what would be the requirements with the parking reduction. And then the blue is as per code currently with the land development code. There hasn't been, or there has been a one public inquiry, but with no objections to the request. And the applicants, Lindsay and I believe Dan, are here from Beyond Shelter to answer any questions that the commission may have.
Thank you, Brad. Any questions? Yes, go ahead.
Back to your slide showing the building. So just a quick question, and maybe this is a question for the applicant. Looking at that screen, I know that the funding initially was such that the whole project that was initially thought about, the funding couldn't be met. So is the other half to the right, is that still in the works down the road?
If you could introduce yourself.
I'm Lindsay Janke. I'm a developer with Beyond Shelter. That part of the site there is, well, this whole site is going to be owned by a Beyond Shelter entity. The residential multifamily building is going to have a ground lease for that particular site. And then that piece on the right is going to be a future development. That's not been set yet.
Okay.
But
So that this whole piece of property falls under Beyond Shelter?
that's correct.
Okay, that was just my question.
Could you tell us a little bit more about Beyond Shelter?
We're a nonprofit developer of affordable housing. We do a lot of senior projects. We have a portfolio here in Fargo, West Fargo, across the state, Minot, Dickinson, Williston, Bismarck. We are also a developer. We work with housing authorities and kind of develop as a partner for them or with them. And Beyond Shelter has been doing this for 23 years now, and with a lot of success in doing so.
So are you funded by grants in particular, or?
No, Beyond Shelter itself, we are a developer like, for-profit developers or developers, except all of our, everything goes back into the mission. So we still operate off of development fees.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Yeah, go ahead.
This question for Brad. Brad, you mentioned the MetroCog parking study. What year was that?
2018, I believe.
Okay. And I guess I asked that because, that report says that we're overparked. We get a ton of parking studies from developers saying that our LDC requires too much parking, and we, have these parking reduction items almost monthly. Can we, is planning department doing anything to get ahead of the LDC update, which I know is a few years out, but it just seems like if we know that we're overparked, can we start making adjustments now to save everyone time?
I know that's been a topic of discussion within the department, is what should we be doing and to what extent? And given, the process of the growth plan amendment and then the land development code rewrite, the effort I think is and Mark, you can probably chime in too, is for the amount of cases that we actually bring to the planning commission, that we might kind of jumble things up and make things maybe possibly worse, or we kind of set a precedent that without having a full study in place to make those recommendations. But
Isn't the MetroCog study a full study?
I think Brad is right on what's going on here. We just hired the consultant to do our growth plan. We have needed identifiable land uses that are going to be identified in the new growth plan. And once we identify those land uses, that's when we're able to dive into the land development code as far as creating the zoning districts that actually complement those land uses that are going to be new and created in the growth plan. At that point, with those new zoning districts and those new uses, then we'd be able to start putting together a parking ratio that is probably more up to date than what we have right now. I would hate to implement something now on a parking study based on the fact that when we actually hire a consultant to help us with our land development code rewrite, there might be different numbers, and then for some reason we have a few buildings out of the chute that might be non-conforming. I do believe that it should be a fairly easy section for the consultant to be able to follow that MetroCog study, because it is a pretty nice study. But I'd like to be able to have those land uses identified in the growth plan, and then the zoning's created before we start committing to that. One thing also is we do a whole bunch of site plans that follow the required parking right now. And I know it seems like the Planning Commission sees a lot of parking reductions, but it's a small percentage based on what we're actually approving in-house by right through administratively.
Thank you. And so what is the estimated timeline? Just to remind us.
This is Mark Williams's wing it answer. So bear with me on this.
Is that why you have that block there, so you can't see when Nicole kicks you under the?
Technically, our growth plan is supposed to take 14 months. We technically started like 6 days ago. And I anticipate the land development code to be a 3-year plus or minus process. I'm kind of hoping that, and this is my crystal ball wish list. I'm kind of hoping that after about 12 months working on the growth plan, we identify those land uses that we're comfortable with. You know, for instance, we really don't have a mixed use or an urban center high density type land use. We did a little bit in that Southwest growth plan, but then those don't correlate to an actual zoning district that's allowed by right. What we're doing is we're getting conditional use permits for residential occupancy and limited commercial zoning. It would be nice to have that by right. So I'm anticipating after about 12 months working on the growth plan, we're going to identify those land uses, and it's going to give us the opportunity to be able to put together the RFP to maybe start going out for the land development code rewrite. So hopefully, you know, we're getting pretty serious about initiating that rewrite about a year from now. If that makes any sense?
Sure. Thanks for that input. I guess looking at the application here, I know we had the applicant up. Any other questions for the applicant? Otherwise, thank you. Anybody else in the audience wishes to talk on this item for or against? Can we blame MetroCog if the parking is wrong? Is that, since they're here? No. Anyways.
And I will add too that there are, the two conditions are that the land use is for senior housing, and that the 1.5 spaces per dwelling unit is maintained.
Thank you. We'll close the public hearing then. Commissioners, what are your wishes?
I'll move to approve as presented.
There's a motion. Is there a second?
Second,
Motion and second. Any discussion? Any real discussion? No. Seeing none, we'll take the roll.
Shuey,
Aye.
Tasa,
Aye.
Schmidt,
Aye.
Morgan,
aye.
Holtz,
Aye.
Dunkelman,
Aye.
Schneider.
Aye. Motion passes. We'll go on to number 9.
Okay, for item number 9 is called the Betlock Edition. It's a major subdivision, including a small vacation of the right-of-way of 18th Avenue North. And just, this is all a typical North Fargo neighborhood. You've got Elephant Park here to the north. And here's some pictures of the existing property. So this is the house, the home. It's a single-family home that is currently there. And and the reason for the vacation and the major subdivision is the owner is looking to demolish the existing home, which is shown in the picture here. And because there's been a substantial disinvestment from the previous owner, and that it doesn't quite justify putting the expenses already into the existing structure. The core neighborhood plan does identify that reinvestment into the core neighborhoods is a key goal. And when the applicant came to our department looking to see the options of tearing down the building, unfortunately the setback requirement would not be met with the home being placed in the exact same spot. So so that's why we're looking at vacating 6 feet of the right-of-way, which actually here it kind of shows on this plat, and then adding that to the owner's property. And looking at kind of the history of how we got here, or why is the home legally non-conforming, is the original plat in 1949 shows the property here in red, and to the north was an individual parcel. Then in 1960, the property to the north was dedicated as 18th Avenue North right-of-way, which made the north boundary of the applicant's property a street side property line. So that setback for a street side setback is 15 feet in this zoning district. And previously, before this dedication, it was only a 5-foot setback. So again, if you were to take down the home, you technically couldn't rebuild it in the same spot just because it wouldn't meet the current land development code. So an option was brought to PUPEC of vacating 6 feet of the 18th Avenue North, which was supported. And by doing that, that would offset the requirement of the current land development code. And based on the property being located where it is today, they would be able to meet the current setback requirements with that 6-foot vacation added to the property. So, so then this is the preliminary plat as stated, and the existing 70-foot right-of-way would be reduced by 6 feet. Engineering sees no concern with that reduction, as it's a very low volume street connecting 2nd Street to 3rd Street, right through that alleyway as well. There are no utilities affected or located or affected in this with this vacation. We have received a couple responses from the public, mainly just concerned that there was nothing more than just a single-family home going back in this resident or in the residential neighborhood to maintain that context, and there was no objections for the vacation or the subdivision. Here's the staff's recommended motion, and pending any questions, that concludes staff's presentation. Brian Thompson and Michael Betlock are with us today to answer any questions as well.
Thank you, Brad. Any questions for staff?
I'd just like to comment that it is inspiring to see someone come forward and want to make an improvement to a neighborhood. It can stabilize a neighborhood, and so it's a good thing as long as it fits.
Absolutely. The applicant wishes to add anything? Any questions for the applicant?
I'd like to hear more.
All right, we'll invite you up.
Excuse me, I have a question for,
Yes.
this is Jennifer Holt.
Yeah, go ahead, Jennifer.
Yeah, I guess this question might be for Brad. But with this vacation, how would that impact the owner, or whose responsibility is it for putting in a sidewalk? This would be is this going to impact, because right now there's not a sidewalk along along where the street curves there. And so is this vacation going to impact the ability to put in a sidewalk there, or is that anything that we need to get some more information about?
It wouldn't impact the ability to put a sidewalk in. I'm not sure if that would be required with this process. I don't know. Maybe Brenda.
Yeah, go ahead, Brenda.
So what we did is how we came up with that 6 feet is looking at new developments and the right-of-way required on local roads and new development. And so that's why we felt we could support that 6 feet, because that is what is in a new development with sidewalks on both sides and the roadway. And so I do not think that by reducing that 6 feet, you are precluding from getting a sidewalk in there. I think the bigger. Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, just to clarify, the responsibility of the improvement to that area, if that were to include a sidewalk, that would fall on the owner, correct?
Correct.
Anything further, Commissioner?
No, thank you.
Thank you. The applicant, introduce yourself, please.
Yes, Michael Betlock, property co-owner.
Any questions for the applicant?
I'm just interested in all neighborhoods, of course, but this would be considered a core neighborhood to me. I would be just hoping, of course, there aren't, have you presented plans to the city that you are taking into consideration the design of the building?
The look and feel of the current neighborhood, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, this isn't, to build some big elaborate house that really doesn't fit in the neighborhood. I'm an interior designer, so just by trade, I kind of know what fits within a certain, area. So we're going to go, kind of take it back, very kind of mid-century, build in the 1950s style too, that fits within the neighborhood. So
Sounds good to me. I'm excited
Yeah.
about seeing what the outcome will be.
yeah, and ultimately, with the vacation of this, 6 feet, it just puts our house, like Brad said, closer to the current building site, the house that's currently there, and also takes our house a little bit further away from the neighbors to the south to add a little bit more, yard space in between the two houses. So,
Sounds like a good plan.
thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions for the applicant? What, 1 second, we'll ask for other comment in a minute and then you can. Any other questions for the applicant? Seeing none, thank you. Anyone else in the public wish to come up? You got to come up to the podium and introduce yourself.
Good afternoon. I'm Nancy Akins, and I live in that neighborhood. And I think as a neighborhood, always been curious to know who that land actually belongs to that we're talking about. Because the previous owner who lived there till he was, no kidding, 99, he took care of that land and, mowed it and took care of it for all those years. And nobody really knows if it's, the city always said it was the park districts is what we heard, and the park district would say it was the cities is what we heard. And I just didn't know if you knew that you have to take care of that land until you're 99. But just, is there an answer to that question?
You mean the land across the street or what?
Nope, right next to the
strip.
land that they're talking about taking the 6 feet
Sure,
from. That,
yeah.
right, what you're pointing at.
Yep, this is part of the right of way. So this would be managed by the city.
No. This is actually part of the right-of-way that was dedicated, and there's provisions that the adjacent property owner is required to maintain between their property line and the curb when it comes to right-of-way. Just like, in the front of most people's yards, the
Sure.
sidewalk's 2 feet off the property line, but you still mow to the curb.
Sure. Okay. So it's the city's land then?
It's public right-of-way.
Okay. Thanks.
Yep, thank you.
I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
So my question is, that's public right away there, and just looking at this aerial, I mean, it's like 30 feet wide right now. Is there any reason why we just kind of stopped at 6 feet that we're giving instead of just dedicate the rest of that to that property owner? I mean, I can't imagine that that road doesn't function well with how small it is right now, and if it was rebuilt, it wouldn't probably get built much wider than what it is right now. So I guess it kind of seems like it's no man's land of a massive boulevard. Is there any reason why they couldn't have just done 15 feet instead of 6 feet? It just kind of seems like an odd chunk of land there.
So I think when we were evaluating it, we're also trying to keep it within the land development code and what right-of-way is acceptable within the land development code. So if we look at this and say we would give up more, then we're becoming non-compliant also. And then the other thing we've been evaluating is there's also a drop-off on the other side. And what if we ever have some stability issues and that needs to be relocated? Then that gives us the flexibility to adjust that road, because one day we're gonna have to reconstruct it.
Thanks for that clarification. Any other questions? Anyone else in the public on this item? Okay, we'll close the public hearing. Commissioners, what are your wishes?
I'd like to make a motion to accept the findings and recommendations of staff.
The motion, is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. Any discussion? Please take the roll.
Morgan,
Aye.
Holtz,
Aye.
Shuey,
Aye.
Dunkelman,
Aye.
Tasa.
Aye.
Schmidt,
Aye.
Schneider.
Aye. Motion passes. That's the end of the public hearings. We'll take a short break before we get on to the other items. Order.
Owns properties.
We'll call the meeting of the Planning Commission back to order.
Yeah.
And we'll move on to, so D1 is continued, just a reminder. We'll move on to MetroCog's presentation on the demographic forecast. The Adam and Ari show.
All right. Thank you, Chair, Commissioners. My name is Adam Altenberg. With me is Ari Del Rosario. And we're here to talk about two documents that MetroCog has recently completed, the 2050 baseline demographic forecast as well as the 2022 Metro Profile. Both these documents have impacts on a number of our different planning studies. They also have valuable information on different demographic and socioeconomic trends in our different communities. So starting with the baseline demographic forecast, this is something that MetroCog does every 5 years as part of its required transportation planning process. The purpose is to develop population, household, and employment forecasts, which can then be translated into our travel demand model. This travel demand model is important for us to assess future roadway, transit, freight, and other multimodal planning needs when we develop our metropolitan transportation plan. But these forecasts are also important for other different studies and planning efforts, including comprehensive plans, sub-area analyses, and other planning documents. So part of the study, we did do some stakeholder engagement. This included both virtual and email input. One of the things that we first looked at is we got statistics from all the different school districts in the area. And we also followed up with a couple of school districts, including Kindred, Moorhead, and West Fargo, just for some additional information about their enrollment projections and other strategic documents that they put together. We also had meetings with different social service organizations, housing organizations, the Home Builders Association, and a couple of economic development organizations such as the EDC, West Fargo's Economic Development Group, Moorhead, Downtown Moorhead Inc., and Downtown Fargo Community Partnership, as well as the Chamber of Commerce. And we also did put together, if you look at the project website, there is a YouTube video that it's a 2 to 3 minute video that kind of highlights this project. And there's also a fact sheet on there as well. It's just a 2-pager that has some of the information that was put together in the document. So I tried to figure out how best to show how our projections compare with our actual employment numbers or population numbers over the years. So if you look at this chart, this is looking at the blue line to the far left. Those are our actual population numbers from 2000 to 2020. And what you can see in those other multicolored lines, these are some of our forecast projections starting all the way back from 1986 and then going up to our last forecast in 2017. And what you can kind of see is that we actually, our projections are usually a little bit conservative. They usually don't add up to what the growth that is actually seen in our communities. The only exception to this was with our last demographic forecast in 2017, as you see on the far right. We actually did overproject a little bit, but that was the first time that we actually had an overprojection in 20 plus years of doing these types of forecasts. And just kind of looking at some of these numbers a little bit closer, the only community that we actually that actually grew faster than what we projected was West Fargo, and they grew at about 3.3% faster than what we had projected for their 2020 estimate. Some of these other numbers, Horace is kind of an outlier here. We had forecasted that Horace would have a population of about 5,000 in 2020 in our 2017 forecast. We knew a lot of things were coming in the pipeline. We knew that Fargo and the city of Horace had signed a wastewater agreement, which had limited their development capacity in the past. We also knew that there was a middle school and high school that was coming online. And I wouldn't be surprised if that number actually kind of adds up now in later in this year or early 2024. I think we were kind of a couple of years ahead of that population forecast. But you can see with some of these other communities, we did kind of overcount. So kind of one of the first years that we actually had that happen. So when we develop these forecasts, there's 3 main components that go into developing these projections. The first are called trend variables. So this looks at different age cohorts. And then we also have our industry labor distribution. We also have dynamic variables, which includes mortality rates and then in and outbound migration rates. And then we also have what are called constants, which looks at our average household size over a period of years, labor force participation rates, and then gender ratio. And then just a little bit more specifics on some of the model inputs that goes into developing these projections. We use the American Community Survey for our initial population cohort and household size distributions. We also use the CDC Wonder Data System, which provides information on death rates and then birth rates and then that gender racial split. We also looked at census data from 2000 and 2010 that helps us to determine household distribution and population makeup. And then we also gathered information from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, which helps us to determine the labor force participation rates. And then the last one, the quarterly census of employment and wages. So this is just a quick snapshot of some of the population projections that we have for the area. We are projecting that the metro area as a whole will grow for about 100,000 people from 2020 to 2050. That's starting with currently in 2020, just under 250,000 population, projected to be 357,000 by 2050. And then for Cass County, you can see that we are projecting, let's see here, going from about 184,000 to 263,000 from 2020 to 2050. And then Clay County from about 65,000 to over 93,000. And then here are just some highlights from different jurisdictions in the area. You can kind of see Fargo, which was italicized here. So we're going from about a population of 126,000 in 2020. We're projecting for Fargo a population of just over 164,000, which is an additional 38,000 residents in the next 30 years. The region as a whole, we're looking at a net population increase of about 107,000, 500 people in the next 25 to 30 years. For household forecasts, for Fargo, you can see that in 2020 we had about 55,000 households. By 2050, we're looking at about 74,000 households, which is an increase of about 18,000 households in that 30-year period. And then for the metropolitan area as a whole, about 43,000 households. And then last here is our employment forecast. I don't have the specific numbers for Fargo on this slide, but I did write them down. It's looking at an increase of just over 100,000 jobs in the area right now in Fargo to 130,000 by 2050. So that would be a 20,000 job increase for Fargo alone, and then almost 52,000 job increase for the entire area over the next 25 to 30 years. With that, I'll turn it over to Ari.
Could I ask a question? Could we go back to the last slide?
Sure.
I'm just interested in looking at these percentages of change. And it indicates information. Is that information technology, or what does that refer to?
Those are media type jobs, so journalists, those sorts of occupations.
Oh, okay, thanks.
So that's the only area that we will see a decrease in professions.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Ari.
Okay. Now, going into the metropolitan profile, in a similar way to the demographic forecast, where that's looking at the future, this is kind of looking at the present, as close to the present as possible. So every year we put together the metropolitan profile to provide a snapshot of what the metro area looks like. At the moment, we have metrics that we track annually, and you can see the link there. It's on our MetroCog's website under resources, and that it has the current metropolitan profile as well as past profiles as well. So just to give you an overview of what is included in this document, it includes a community profile that gives the demographics, employment, and housing information of our region, and then as well as transportation information such as roadways, freight, bike and pedestrian, and transit data. This document is supposed to be kind of like a neat package for the jurisdictions to help you as a resource to see how a region is faring. So if there's anything in the future, since we do this every single year, if there's anything when you're looking through this that you think, I would love it if you had this in the Metro profile in the future, just let us know and we can look to include that as well. So just to give a brief summary of what's in here, we've got the community profile, so you can see the change. So when we look at the metropolitan profile, this was completed last year. It's always a year delay looking at the year previous. So this is using 2021 data. So you can see the percentage population change there. You can also see population by jurisdiction. So generally, you'll see that Fargo there makes up about half of the population of the entire metro area. And you can see the number of residents, so 2,293 new residents in 2021. And there are some graphs there that show the annual population growth in our region. There's some demographic information in here as well that's easy to pick out. We've got the median age in our region is much younger than the national average. You can see there, and then also in terms of education, our region has high percentage of those that have a bachelor's degree or higher compared to the country as a whole, and then speaking a language other than English at home and foreign-born is still quite low compared to the percentages of the national average. And then you can see kind of a breakout of age distribution and racial composition as well. So these are kind of metrics that you'll see in every metro profile. So you can look back and see how these change over time. We have some employment information. In 2021, it's still kind of recovering from the pandemic. So you can see that the unemployment rate in our region, whilst it was slowly declining, you can see as well there's quite a noticeable gap between the unemployment rate in our region compared to that of the country, quite a bit lower. The median household income is pretty comparable to the country as a whole. Percent in poverty went down in 2021 and is comfortably below that of the country as a whole. And a new metric that was added to the metropolitan profile was working from home, which is interesting to see that number grow. And there's also in top 10 industries ranked by employment there. In terms of housing, the average household size in our region is smaller than that of the country as a whole, and the owner-occupied rate is also slightly lower. Those could be due to, as we can imagine, college-age students. There are a lot more college-age students in the region, and that can be seen in having a younger population as well. The median house price in 2021 is still below that of the national, even though that's continuing to slowly rise. And then you can see some information there as well as the number of housing units that have been built in 2021. We also have a section in the Metro profile for roadways. So this includes vehicle miles traveled. It includes travel time reliability, commute times, roadway projects that were completed in 2021, safety and pavement condition, as well as a map for our functional classification system. There's also a section for freight in the document, which shows the air cargo total landed weight, which has been quite high since the pandemic and wasn't as affected by the pandemic as some of the other metrics that we follow. We have truck travel times, and we also have truck unreliable road segments. In here as well, we also have more rail and air information, such as our Amtrak system, which has been seen quite a hit since the pandemic. But we can also see the air passengers has rebounded quite a bit and is coming back up to pre-pandemic levels. And so all of that information's in there as well. There's a bike and pedestrian section in this document, which shows the number of bike trips that are taken in our region, some of the bike non-motorized crashes in our region as well, bike and ped projects from the past year, a bike network map, and MetroCog also puts together an annual bike and ped count study. So that's the information for that is in this and is directed from this study as well. And then finally, we have transit. So we can see the total MAP bus passengers in our region still below pre-pandemic levels and slowly trying to climb back up, although paratransit ridership has been doing better than our fixed route system. This section also includes transit projects that have occurred in the past year, including route changes, fares, and marketing studies. A route map is included in this document every year, as well as some of the fleet inventory purchases and facility improvements that have been occurring. So that's a lot of information distilled into one document. So if you've got any questions, just let us know.
It's a lot of good information there. Any questions? Go ahead. All right, we'll go to John first.
First of all, I take it a lot of this information probably helped you a bit in the housing study that you're currently putting together for the metro area?
Yeah, correct. Yep. A lot of the information that we put together for at least for the demographic forecast, we did share with the consultant that's working on the housing study for the region.
One of your questions in there, Ari, pardon me, was the home ownership in Fargo itself. Do you have that broken out anywhere? I mean, can you break that out?
I probably have it somewhere. It's not in the document, but I probably have it somewhere broken out by
because
jurisdiction
we've always
as well.
been told that we're nationwide, the home ownership rate is about 60%. And yet Fargo, we've always been told, hovers more down around 40%. Now, when you bring in West Fargo, Horace, and Moorhead, which tend to be what I guess we've always called them bedroom communities, I'm wondering if that brings that total up to where, I mean, that looked very close to the normal average, which we've always been told we have this large concentration of apartments in Fargo.
Right.
Because Minnesota was never friendly to apartments. So if sometime you could just, if you've got that data in the archives somewhere,
Sure.
it'd be interesting to know that,
Yeah.
just to see where Fargo itself is in that ratio.
Yeah, sure. We can definitely take a look, and if we want to include it in future, we can do that. I would imagine that sounds about right. That we would see that particularly West Fargo and Horace and some of those outer communities would be
higher in housing.
Yeah,
Okay,
be higher.
thank you.
Commissioner Morgan?
Yeah, I just had a question, not relating to your presentation, but have you heard anything more about the potential for passenger travel train coming through Fargo, going to Billings rather than up, going through northern Montana, out to Seattle area?
That is a good question. MetroCog is actually going to be participating in, there's a day-long seminar this Thursday to talk about that with other entities throughout the Midwest. So we should have a little bit more information here about that after this, this session here later this week.
Oh.
So it still is a discussion item, yeah.
Who's involved in the discussions?
I could give you a list of it's different cities, counties, MPOs, other jurisdictions, across 10 states, I believe. So
Oh, that's very exciting.
it's a pretty large coalition, yeah.
Great. All right, we'll hope for an update one of these days.
Sounds good. Any other questions for MetroCog? Thanks for joining us again today. Anything else on that? Okay, we'll move on. We'll call, I think, Jim up to talk about D3. Mr. Craig's been patiently waiting.
Is this bingo?
Yeah, D3. Bingo. We're here till the blackout, so we're going to be here a while. So.
What do we win?
Yeah.
He said D3. What
The,
kind of bingo do you play?
Yeah.
I know you.
Bingoed.
Anyway.
Bingo?
You've been working on the rezoning of the block project in that 1600 block of University Drive South for the Mr. Craig's development. Kind of parallel to that, he's requested some property tax incentives to assist with that development. And those incentives are going through our Economic Development Incentives Committee. Whenever we're creating a tax increment financing district, the state law provides that the Planning Commission has an opportunity to make a recommendation on whether or not the plan is consistent with really the plan for the city or other plans. You know, the fact that just a month ago you recommended approval of the rezoning kind of says it's consistent with the plan. And so I'm probably try to keep it real simple, and that this plan that's drafted is consistent with the zoning and consistent with redevelopment. I think it's also consistent with the fact that we're going to need more housing, and many of our growth plans call for infill development as much as possible. And this particular block now has a value of 2.8 million. This new development will increase the value to about 30 million. And again, the Economic Development Incentives Committee is recommending various property tax incentives for that. So, but really the role of the Planning Commission isn't to look at the incentives, it's just whether or not this plan itself is consistent with the plans for the city. So, and I think it is. I'll just kind of go through this. You see the location. You've, I think, seen all of these before. As far as one of the things we look at is whether or not this meets the definition for blighted property. And when you look at the condition of some of the commercial buildings, you look at some of these houses with a lot of deteriorated siding as well as deteriorated insides, it does meet the definition of a blighted property. And so that's also why we find that the renewal plan is consistent with the city's comprehensive plan as well as the land use plan for the core neighborhood. So be happy to answer any questions.
I have one question. So just on our role, so our role is to recommend that's consistent with the Go 2030 comprehensive plan. I guess if not for this one necessarily, but in the future, it'd be nice just to have a nice matrix that shows what are the requirements that we're looking for that it meets. Or
Yeah.
is it vague that we kind of go through this and say what feels like it meets it? Or are there specific criteria that, like our planning commission agendas, has the criteria and each one's satisfied?
I think the main criteria is it consistent with the zoning, and it is. So, and you can look at the core neighborhood plan, and identifies this particular block for a mixed-use development. So,
any questions for Jim?
So one of the things, I thought your question was more about what defines blading rather than the other side of it.
No, I just, if our role is it's consistent with the Go 2030 comprehensive plan, it would be nice to know very specifically what criteria are we looking for that it's consistent with the plan.
Okay, well, I guess blighted came up for me, but it's definitely blighted property. And I mentioned this before, at our last meeting about the alley that's behind there that isn't public, but it's bad. It doesn't look as bad as it really is from this photo, but it's always had a lot of kind of abandoned vehicles that haven't been moved for years, and it's just not, it's kind of an area that really needs an upgrade. So I'm really happy to see this go forward.
Yeah, I don't know if this was ever platted as an alley or, some cases around town you had blocks developed and there were never an alley there. In some cases it was there, and because it was, vacated at some point because the property owner was the same on both sides, so.
Yeah, Harvey Lane. Yeah, and he had a lot of junky kind of places too around town.
Any other questions on the renewal plan?
I have a question.
Yeah,
This
go
is
ahead.
Jennifer.
Go ahead.
Oh, you mentioned that certainly our role here is simply to affirm or recognize that this renewal plan is consistent with the zoning and our comprehensive plan. You also said that the Economic and Development Commission has yet to vote on the tax incremental funds, right?
No, they have recommended
tax
approval of it. They did that last month, and this will go to City Commission in 2 weeks. Both their recommendation for the economic development incentives as well as your recommendation for the rezoning.
Okay. Thank you for clarifying that. I misheard you. I guess the point I was just trying to make was maybe to a larger point that when we have different commissions that may not have direct interaction with each other, I guess my goal or my question would be, how can we make sure we have information shared appropriately so that we're not operating within silos? So I appreciate you clarifying that they had recommended approval. Thank you. Was there anything that came up in that meeting that that would be helpful in addition to what we're discussing today?
No, I think they just feel that this property is, got quite a bit of blight. It's probably headed down in terms of property values. A lot of the homes are boarded up at this point and would be considered dangerous buildings. And so, again, you look at the land use plan, this is consistent with that. Both the land use plan for the neighborhood as well as the overall philosophy of the Go 2030 comprehensive plan of encouraging infill development. So, I'll make one comment on the apartments. I gotten this question over and over. Commissioner Gunkelman's correct. The national home ownership rate is right around 60%. Fargo is roughly around 45%. I think that was the last number. But we're very consistent for every other college community of that size. The metro rate is around 55%. So the metro rate tends to be a little below the national rate because we have a relatively young community. If you look at the home ownership rate of 45-year-olds in Fargo versus 45-year-olds nationally, there's not much of a difference. It's just that we have a lot of people in their 20s that don't tend to own homes.
To what you just said, how did our age, you've been around a little while like me, is the age of this community continued to drop?
I think it continues to be younger than average because when you have growth, the people that tend to migrate are younger. People don't tend to move when they're in their 50s. They tend to move when they're in their 20s. So when you have new people migrating into the community, and like you see with these population projections, they tend to be in their 20s, along with obviously the university enrollment. People are in college generally are in their 20s.
Well, that average age really surprised me at whatever, 32 or whatever, 32 or 4.
Well, now that we moved on from the MetroCog presentation to this renewal plan.
Yeah, I'll get you back, but I've heard that question over and over, so I thought I'd give you my canned answer.
So just to add to that on diversion, I've seen those statistics before about the very young average age, and it's always been explained by the young people, the various colleges and universities in town. But I'm wondering what you're thinking about the baby boomers, how those people are kind of going away.
Wait a minute, watch it.
All right, well, I'm just wondering if you have any predictions as to what's going to happen with that older age group. Is our average demographic going to go down
I mean,
again?
I think what you're going to see is that there's going to be more people in their 60s and 70s, and we know that because they're in their 50s and 60s now. So you look at that age cohort, that's going to increase. You know, it's harder to look out beyond 20 years, but for instance, the need for senior housing is going to continue to be increased. We've seen that in the past housing studies. I expect when we look at this housing study, we'll see the same thing. There's just going to be more people that are in their 60s and 70s than there were 10 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Mark, one question maybe for you or Donald, but I guess on this development as a whole, we had continued the PUD item, and then we have this item. What the PUD comes back to us, and then is that the final time we talk about this development?
Yeah, the zoning will go to city commission, but then once the concept is put together for the final plan approval, it'll come back to the planning commission before we can issue any building permits.
So one more chance for him to bring pizza. Is that what you're saying? Okay. That's good. Okay, renewal plan. Anybody else have questions on it?
So you want a motion?
There's a recommended motion on the screen?
I'll make that motion to find the renewal plan consistent with the city's comprehensive plan and core neighborhood plan.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Any other discussion? Call the roll.
Morgan.
Aye.
Shuey.
Aye.
Tassa.
Aye.
Schmidt.
Aye.
Foltz.
Aye.
Gunkelman.
Aye.
Schneider.
Aye. And then there's one more item on here. Well, the motion passes. The one more item is D4. It's just a staple thing, but one thing I've been talking to staff about is I'm always curious. I think our liaison commissioner asked too, what else could she be providing as a city commissioner back to us as well? That would be helpful. And my question's always been, I don't think we all watch the city commission meetings, you know, but it'd be nice to know, does the city commission concur with our recommendations or do they disagree? And just having that sort of feedback loop so that we don't operate in silos, I think, as the other commissioner said. So this is really just a table of all of our actions in the last year and what the city commission ended up doing. And it's something that I guess I don't know if staff keeps track of this, but I'd like to kind of keep looking at it. The nice part is all of 2022, the city commission concurred with our recommendations, so not a lot to talk about. We must be doing well. We're in sync. But if there is, opportunities to learn when we disagree, it'd be good to get another perspective. So, but anyways, just for everybody's information. It's like a report card, I guess. Any questions on that, though? I know staff would be happy to answer any questions on it, but we don't need to go through line by line. It was all concurred, so.
Excellent.
You want a star?
I don't know, you want to talk about old people getting old? Is there a renewal? Do you have a renewal plan?
If I don't keep getting old.
Okay, take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, motion and second. All in favor, say aye.
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 Thank you. We are adjourned.